Have you ever filmed a video in advance only to watch it 2 weeks later when you're ready to post it and decide, I can't post that? There is so much more I want to say about that topic. I have. Hi everyone, and welcome back to Blatantly Bookish. I'm Marissa, and today I'd like to talk about the book Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates and the topic of race in America. Now, this book obviously resonated with me if I still have more to say a month, maybe even more after I've read the book. When I first filmed this video, I actually filmed it as a dual review of Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates and Dear Ijewole by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I thought that was a really good idea at the time because both books are letters, written as letters. You know, they're addressed to somebody who is not the reader, and they both deal with issues that are somewhat controversial within society. Between the World and Me talks about race in America, and Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's book talks about feminism, what it means to be a feminist, and how to raise your daughter as a feminist. I ended up talking way more about Between the World and Me, and I think that's because it's something that I didn't think of as much as I already think about feminism. And feminism is something that I am passionate about, that I discuss a lot. I read a lot of books that deal with gender, and I don't read as many books that deal with race, and I am not as comfortable discussing race. And I think that that is really interesting. I mean, obviously, I am not a black man in America, which perhaps makes it more difficult for me to talk about Between the World and Me because it is about a black man's experience. But I decided that I had more to say about Between the World and Me, and I'd like to pretty much discuss that, just that, because it deserves its own video. So I discussed this book towards the end of my April wrap-up. You should check that out if you haven't already. I'll link it up above. And the basic premise of the book is that it is a book-length letter to Ta-Nehisi Coates' son in the wake of one of the major shootings of a person of color in America. And specifically, it hinges off of this experience that Ta-Nehisi Coates has where he hears his son crying in his room after the police officer involved in one of these major events was acquitted. His experiences did resonate with me and did affect me, and that is why I think it is important to talk about them. Now, when I first read this book, I was really, really uncomfortable with it. It is so eloquently written that only makes his experiences more problematic to me and richer and more meaningful. And he is just a fantastic writer, and that is reason alone to read this book. But the main problem I had while reading this book, the reason it made me so uncomfortable, is that it didn't give any suggestions for the future. It didn't give me much hope, and that's not its fault. I was comparing it to Dear Ijewole, and Dear Ijewole actually in its title says 15 suggestions. It has the word suggestions in it. It is supposed to be that kind of book that is telling you something you can do. It tells you how to raise your daughter as a feminist, and I argue that it tells you how to raise a son as a feminist as well. It gives you advice based on one specific person's experiences growing up, but it gives you advice. Between the World and Me is not an advice book. It was never marketed to me as an advice book. And so for me to be angry that it didn't tell me how to combat race in America is, just besides the point, because it was never supposed to tell me how to combat race in America, how to live my life as a racially conscious individual. And it's unfair to put all of that weight onto one person, onto one author. I mean, Ta-Nehisi Coates is brilliant, but that doesn't mean he needs to have all of the answers to a problem that has existed in America for hundreds of years. I mean, that's just not fair. No matter how brilliant he is, one person can't solve the problem of race in America. And I think, if anything, the book, what it does is it illuminates one man's experience. And you start to wonder, well, okay, How many more people have an experience that's really similar to his? Maybe a lot. I'd like to get into some more nitty-gritty details now, unpack some quotes for you guys, and that involves showing you some of the previous footage that I filmed that I was actually really excited to share with you. So I hope you won't be too distracted. It is filmed in a completely different location. I have since moved and I have since cut my hair. But without further ado, enjoy. Much of Ta-Nehisi Coates' book hinges on the worry of his own experiences and fears influencing the experiences that he allows his son to have. He also acknowledges that there are certain qualities that he is inherently passed on with the identity of blackness to his son. My major issue with this book was how often he conflates the individual with the larger group that they belong to in society. And after really thinking about this book, that issue also became its greatest strength. He describes whiteness as having no real meaning divorced from criminal power. He says, white America is a syndicate arrayed to protect its exclusive power to dominate and control our bodies. Sometimes this power is direct, lynching, and sometimes it is insidious, redlining. But however it appears, the power of domination and exclusion is central to the belief in being white, and without it, white people would cease to exist for want of reasons. These are direct quotes, and they led me to wonder, am I part of this white America? And do I even have a choice in the matter? Or will people just look at me and conflate me with this concept of whiteness, which is so clearly damaging to Coates and those who simply don't have the privilege to identify as white? In his passages, he did to me what society does to him every day. He pigeonholed me. In this case, into a category of whiteness, a category that incorporates criminality and racism. But he uses his power as an author to put me in an uncomfortable and powerless situation. And that just shows how damaging wielding these assumptions that come with larger societal categories can be. And it worked beautifully. But sometimes he equates the individual with larger societal groups in a way that I'm not okay with, and in a way that by no means is his fault, because it stems from his personal experiences, but in a way that is deeply problematic nonetheless. I'm specifically talking about the way he refers to schools and the police. Of schools, he says, I came to see the streets and the schools as arms of the same beast. One enjoyed the official power of the state, while other enjoyed its implicit sanction, but fear and violence were weaponry of both. Fail in the streets and the crews would catch you slipping and take your body. Fail in the schools and you would be suspended and sent back to those same streets where they would take your body. And I began to see these two arms in relation. Those who failed in the schools justified their destruction in the streets. The society could say he should have stayed in school and then wash its hands of him. It does not matter that the intentions of individual educators were noble. Forget about intentions. What any institution or its agents intend for you is secondary. Our world is physical. Learn to play defense. Ignore the head and keep your eyes on the body. Very few Americans will directly proclaim that they are in favor of black people being left to the streets. But a large number of Americans will do all they can to preserve the dream. No one directly proclaimed that schools were designed to sanctify failure and destruction, but a great number of educators spoke of personal responsibility in a country authored and sustained by a criminal irresponsibility. The point of this language of intention and personal responsibility is broad exoneration. Mistakes were made. Bodies were broken. People were enslaved. We meant well. We tried our best. Good intention is a hall pass through history, a sleeping pill that ensures the dream. Now, good intentions should not be an afterthought, or something said to excuse and absolve one from the destruction and consequences of their actions. But I think good intentions are important as motivations for the individual. Not all individuals who work within these systems of the school or the police force view themselves as agents of their institution, as Coates puts it. Some of them, many of them, I'd imagine, resent the connotations of that institution as much as Coates does. Much of what Coates says takes away the power of an individual within an institution. And I think that that's a really cynical way to look at our society, because I believe in individuals, and I would argue that if you look at history, it is full of individuals who demand power and control, some of which who use systems, or some of which who go against their systems, but all to enact change. And perhaps the most upsetting conflation of the individual with society that Coates writes about in his book is with regards to 9/11. I could see no difference between the officer who killed Prince Jones, his friend, and the police who died or the firefighters who died. They were not human to me. Black, white, or whatever. They were the menaces of nature. They were the fire, the comet, the storm, which could, with no justification, shatter my body. He is literally standing on a rooftop in New York, watching people of all races, genders, and sexes putting their lives on the line and saving other people's lives. And all he can do is equate them with the same societal institution that murdered his friend. And that's just deeply upsetting and disturbing to me. I think this passage shows how problematic it can be when we conflate the individual with a larger societal group, and when we make assumptions based on our previous experiences with others who've belonged to that group. Because Coates knows that these policemen and firefighters on 9/11 weren't the same individuals who murdered his friend. He's an intelligent guy, but the way he writes this is so powerful because of these individuals representing the larger societal institutions they belong to. Now, something I wonder about this book is, what is Coates' purpose in writing it? And what does he hope to achieve? Is it supposed to be a memoir and just share his experiences and hope that they affect you as a person? Is it supposed to be for Black people, white people, all Americans, children? Is it really actually for his son? Or is that just a literary device he uses? Because he has moments where he discusses a similar idea to Adichie, which is namely that he doesn't want to pass on some of his experiences and viewpoints and his frustrations and anger onto his son. Wouldn't this book, though, do just that? Or maybe it wouldn't. I mean, I'd be so curious to hear if his son has read this book and what that conversation was like when he finished it. So, anyway, this book was complex and disturbing and uncomfortable, and I am so glad that I read it. So, those were some of my better and more eloquent thoughts on this book. Have you read this book? I really want to know if you have. I think it's a book that everyone in America should read and should try to talk about, because I think the only way to make our society better is to discuss the issues within it and how they affect everyone. Thank you guys for watching the entirety of this video. Please comment down below. I'd love to continue the discussion with you guys, either on this platform or on a different platform. Please keep your comments respectful, and I look forward to seeing you in another video soon. Until then, happy reading!
You tell me that it's evolution.